Hi, everyone, and welcome to Book It. I'm Carol Ann Riddell. We start today with a corporate executive turned author. Joe Davis is a managing director and senior partner with Boston Consulting Group. His book is The Generous Leader: 7 Ways to Give of Yourself for Everyone's Gain. Joe, thanks so much for coming by today.
Well, thank you, Carol Ann, for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So you joined Boston Consulting, which is a massive global firm in, I believe it was 1988. That is quite a run in the corporate world. Your book, as we mentioned, is The Generous Leader. So Joe, what is a generous leader?
Well, to me, a generous leader is someone who gives of themselves freely, without expectation of direct personal benefit, so others can grow, develop, and thrive at their full potential. So by the generous, it's really enabling you to perform at your best.
And you say that the old model of the corporate executive, the corporate leader, the kind of top-down boss, that doesn't work anymore. Why doesn't that work anymore?
I think today, it started with technology. COVID just put an end to it. We bring our personal self to work nowadays. And you want to be human at work, you have to be, because work could be at home, it could be in an office, it could be, and you expect and want to see some humanity from your leader. I just think that's now what's, there's other reasons, but I think that's what's driving this change.
And it's interesting what you mentioned about technology, because that is the case. We certainly saw that line between work and home blur during COVID, but it really did start before that, didn't it? Even when we had BlackBerry.
There you go. The BlackBerry, no, all of a sudden you were on 24/7, 365. And if you remember, that was kind of cool, but actually it got tiresome, and the phones only made it more. With the phone and social media, even the data says that anxiety and uncertainty just climbed with social media. So that's all the more reason that at work, you can't just hide who you are, and you need a leader that's going to try to connect with you.
In the book, you lay out sort of a 7-part framework for becoming a generous leader. So what is the first step?
I think the most important or first step, although it's not necessarily the first chapter, is really to listen, to learn. Listen, understand what's in your mind that I need to know. What is your lived experience? What is your perspective? That's just so critical if you're really going to inspire and motivate and connect with people.
One thing you said in the book that stayed with me is see the person, not the role. But I imagine in a huge corporate structure, that takes some very intentional effort.
Yep, you put it very well. I always say you really have to care. Now, you got to find your own way to care, that's your version of intentional. I cannot really connect with you if I just see you as a TV host. I got to see you as Carol Ann too, and something there's part of your life that I don't know completely. The more I connect with that, the more we can be human together.
But being a generous leader does not mean being a pushover. In the book, you advocate for what you sort of describe as a tough love approach to feedback. So what do you mean by that?
First off, you're right. It's not just about being nice. As a leader, you have to get outcomes. If you don't get results, you're probably not going to stay in the job. But the sooner you understand you get results by teaming with and inspiring and motivating your people, the sooner you're going to get to the outcomes. So on the tough love, I'm just the same point there. If you're really going to enable somebody to grow and develop at their best, you've got to be giving them feedback. Now, the important thing, I think, is you first have to create some sort of relationship, recognize them for who they are. You ideally understand some of their strengths, because then they can leverage their strengths to be better at their job. But then, you say tough love, or the flip side of that is, I hate nothing more than mush. I hate mush feedback. Oh, you did a pretty good job on that show. Maybe next time don't cross, just think about doing better. Now, what do I do with that?
Yeah, that is so true. That kind of vague feedback doesn't really give you anything.
No, and it's very common because the giver is afraid to say, listen, John, you really screwed up meeting because you said the word like every third word. Maybe don't say like. Whoa, you don't want to say like. Yeah, that's what you work on.
Okay. All right. I'm going to be waiting for your feedback to me.
No, you got there. Well, it's funny I said, because I did tell once I had a fellow who was working for me. He was 30 years old. We were in a CEO session, the executives, and he said like every 9th word.
Yes.
And afterwards I said to him, in front of everybody, not the client, they left, I said, Alex, how old are you? So I'm 30. I said, 12-year-olds say like, not 30-year-olds. Cut the likes. And he was like, I punched him. He said, but I never said like again, Joe.
All right, there you go.
So no, yeah.
Well, so Joe, is there an example of a time when you were on the receiving end of some of that very direct feedback?
Yeah. One of my favorites, because it was direct in one hand, but it was actually quite kind in another. I had a mentor forever, and he said, you know, Joe, he said, if I put you and this other person in a room, 4 white walls, no door, and you have to solve the toughest problem to get, a very tough problem to get out, you'll probably never get out. Boom. This other fellow will get out every time. However, when you're out, and I say, would you please get that done? He'll never execute or implement it, and you'll implement it every time.
Huh.
You know, and there was a message, well, the first half, we'll let it go, but this message in the second half is really the feedback of you team well with people, you connect to people, I know what I don't know to the point of listening.
Yes.
And surround myself with people. I never forget doing that, Joe. You know, don't go be a hero.
So Joe, how many people have you overseen at your time in BCG? And what would you say, looking back on those years, has been your biggest challenge as a leader?
Wow. I've overseen thousands, so let me just say that.
That's what I thought, yes.
Whatever that means. My biggest challenge, I think, earlier on, I would have been impatient, thought I knew answers, and therefore wasn't really listening to what the other person's coming from and cutting them off. That was because I thought, okay, I already know where we're going. I'm always in a hurry. I want to get things done. And I wasn't really giving the grace to listen to another person. This was driven home once, the general counsel at BCG. I guess I used to cut her off once I knew what she was going to say. And one time I think she didn't slap me, but she goes, Joe, would you just stop and please let me finish? I mean, it was very direct, but it was a very powerful lesson for me. I thought, whoa, because I assumed I knew where she was going, but what if I was wrong? And by the way, I was showing no respect anyway.
Wow, that's really
interesting. That was my biggest challenge, probably, which I developed.
Clearly.
Yeah, right.
So much so that you wrote a book about it.
Yeah, right.
I want to talk a little bit about authenticity and vulnerability in the workplace, because I do think that many people feel being vulnerable can be a negative. And what is your reaction to that?
I think it's essential. Nobody is perfect. And so a leader that tries to come across as perfect and nothing's wrong ever and I've got all the answers, shows no vulnerability, which can even be, I don't know. It's really hard for us to follow those people. And the minute you share some vulnerability, which could be as simple as I don't know, you know, other people say, the leader doesn't know either. Oh, it's okay for me not to know. And they move past their roadblocks, they move past their own fears. And of course, it also humanizes you. I mean, I can tell you a quick story. Do you have time?
Yeah, we have time.
A story. A friend of mine told me, I asked him, you know, when did you cross your line to being a little more vulnerable? He said, well, his thing was he was afraid to say, I don't know. And he'd literally be in meetings, and he was the boss in the room, and if he could see if the room was getting stuck and was going to turn to him and ask what direction, where they should go, before he'd have to say, I don't know, he'd leave the room.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Wow, like how is that for productive in the business world?
Yeah.
So he said, finally one day I said, okay, let it go. So they turned to him and he said, you know, I don't know either. And everyone said, whoa, you don't know? And all of a sudden the creative juices flew and they all flew. None of us know. Let's buckle down and think about it and get going.
Because there's a lot of power in that.
Oh yeah. And you know, and that's, I actually think people sometimes think vulnerability is, oh, you need to cry in front of me every other day. You don't, I mean, that's fine. If that's, I cry a lot, that's okay. But even a simple I don't know is a huge sign of vulnerability.
Yeah, and can be something that's very hard to do in a high stakes moment at work.
Right, right. Yeah, but you know, you're usually unlocking and unleashing energy and you know, when you do that, as opposed to causing everybody to freeze.
I know from reading the book, Joe, that you are a believer in small things making a big difference, things like a handwritten note. I'm a believer in that too. My mother successfully drilled that into me. But tell me why you think small things are so powerful.
Well, because if they're a handwritten note that means something to you and recognizes something you performed, you feel very good. So they're very powerful. They show that I took the time, I or you, to spend the 1 or 2 minutes, it's usually 1 or 2 minutes. They're also quite powerful because they're very easy to do. Recognizing somebody on their birthday, sending an email, hey, great job, and maybe even copy the rest of the team so everyone sees who you're congratulating.
Yeah.
You know, they're very simple. I mean, I think we all, you know, you remember the gold star on the top of your
Sure.
Oh, yeah, see, look at your
Who
smile.
didn't love that?
I know, there
Who
you go.
didn't
So
love the
I don't
gold
know, you
star?
could just say that and you got the point.
Yeah. Joe, just a last question for you. What you talk about in the book clearly feels like it applies to more than the corporate world. So who is this book for?
I think it's for anybody who wants to build more human connection with their counterparts, whether it's in life, whether it's, you know, a coach, We won't go into politics, but I wish each of us in this country would think a
Yeah.
little bit more about ask and listen and
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from. That can make a big difference. So quite frankly, any of us that want to be in positive relationships, you could say it's for.
All right, Joe, thank you so much for this time. Lots
Thank
of good
you.
advice in there.
Great.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Now let's head to our podcast studio to see what Isabel Ortiz has for us in Breaking Books.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Breaking Books. I'm Isabel Ortiz, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with author Alejandro Varela to discuss his short story collection, The People Who Report More Stress. Hi Alejandro, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Isabel, for having me.
I just want to tell you that with this book, I found myself almost picking up my highlighter to highlight almost every other line in this book just because of how relatable it was and how funny it was, but also extremely vulnerable. So I wanted just for you to explain a little bit about the people who report more stress.
You notice that the title isn't the people who have stress, it's the people who report more stress. So I think some of the preoccupations in the book, the narrator is pretty consistent throughout. He, I would say, is an angst-ridden narrator who maybe isn't comfortable in his class and in his position in society. And so he spends a lot of time agonizing about the stress of society. But he, unlike a lot of other people that he worries about or that he sort of stands in solidarity with, he has the means to protect himself. He has the buffers, he has the money, he owns the home, he has the partner, the children. He's living the life that we were meant to live. But I think what he is reporting in these stories is really this idea that if you do it alone, it's not fun. So if you don't take your community with you, if you don't take your family with you, you're always going to be worried about all the people around you who are suffering. And if you're alone, then there's going to be a distance between you and the rest of the party.
In your novel before this, The Town of Babylon, it received a lot of praise, and you were even a finalist for the National Book Award in 2022. So compared to writing a novel like The Town of Babylon and then a book which is a collection of stories like The People Who Report More Stress, how does the writing differ in that?
With a novel, there's a bit more room to breathe and to go off in different directions. And so I feel less constrained by the novel. And the sort of irony of it is that I wasn't interested in being a novelist. I was a short story writer, but in this publishing industry, short stories don't sell as well as novels. And so trying to make a living from it, which is to say to get a contract with a publisher, is harder if you only have short stories. And so people would say, well, we love your stories, but do you also have a novel? We'll buy both. Do you have a novel? Do you have a novel? And so I sat down to write a short story that I'd had in mind that I thought was going to be a longer short story. And it ended up being the novel that is The Town of Babylon.
Something I really enjoyed about this book is that with these characters, especially with Eduardo, he is sometimes frustrating to the point where I want to shake him. And then at other times I find him extremely relatable and funny. What does it take for you to write characters who fulfill both these things, who are humorous, who are frustrating, and who are relatable?
So my narrators tend to be anxious. I might have that in common with them. But I think anxiety is pervasive in society, and I think a lot of people can relate to the experience of being in your head, overthinking a situation, regretting, wishing you could go back in time to fix something, always sort of trying to be one step ahead. And I would say that there are portions of society, particularly if we name oppressed groups, where that is much more common because you have been observing for so long and maybe participating less in the conversation. You have a lot going on in your head and you're always operating double consciousness, I think. And so that's kind of sad. But it's also, when you think about it, pretty funny to be always thinking about every possible scenario and how it could go and living that way.
And you kind of see that all come together in the last story, in the title story, where Eduardo is diagnosed with cancer and he is kind of tying his own anxiety to his cancer diagnosis. And there's a line in there that really struck me. And it was from Eduardo's mother. You had all the opportunities. You speak the language. This is your country. Why do you live like this, anxious like me? Can you tell me about what really this line means to you?
Well, I do think about this often, about how when you get to this country, for a lot of immigrants, there is a protective shield, a buffer, right? You feel like a stranger, like a visitor. You defer to the majority. You sort of just put your head down. You ignore all of the socio-political things around you. Not everyone, but I've seen a lot of this. And so that protects you from a lot of the slings and arrows, from racism, from classism, from xenophobia. It psychologically protects you. It doesn't mean that you don't experience terrible things, but you're able to say, I'm visiting, I'm borrowing space and time in this country that isn't mine. I'm just going to work, and my children will do better. The thing is that if everyone in the next generation doesn't make it through, it becomes that much harder to break through in successive generations. And so, and to make matters worse, you don't have the same buffers because you actually grow up believing this is my country. I have a right to be here. I should have all the rights and protections that everyone else has. So it's much harder to fall back onto it's not my problem. I'm just going to put my head down and work. I'll get paid whatever they offer me. I'll do whatever they tell me to do. No, suddenly you're like, wait a second. I know the labor law in this country. I know how to protect myself. And so it creates for this disparity between generations, misunderstandings often. And that's what I was trying to get at, that this mother who presumably came to this country and dealt with a lot of strife, mostly economic, and her son is successful and he's still sort of flailing in some ways and isn't happy in his success.
So you have the people who report more stress, you have the town of Babylon. What is next for you?
So next year will be a novel that I just finished. I'm in the process of final edits, and it's called Middle Spoon.
Okay.
And it is about grief, actually. It's about heartbreak and the sensations that one feels when they are undergoing that experience or living through it.
Well, keep an eye out for it, and I'm very excited to read it. But I just want to say thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Isabel.
Now to the fine print. Many of us associate public libraries with kids and reading, but there is a lot more available for people of all ages. Joining us to talk about some new initiatives, Dame Louise Richardson, president of the Carnegie Corporation, and Dennis Walcott, president and CEO of the Queens Public Library. Thanks so much to both of you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for having us.
So, Dame Louise, let me begin with you by asking you, Carnegie recently announced a $4 million grant for the public libraries. What does that involve?
Well, we hope it's actually the first of many, but it involves gifts to 3 of the libraries, New York Public Library, Queens and Brooklyn, to support the amazing work they're doing, providing English language training to immigrants and some of the teen programs they're doing to help the teens be ready for college.
Mm-hmm. So Dennis, what kind of a difference will that make for the libraries you oversee in Queens?
One, I want to say thank you to Dame Louise and the Carnegie Corporation because it will allow us to expand our services to the public, to people who are coming for services at the library. A lot of time with new immigrants, when they come to New York City, the first thing they do is go to one of the 3 public library systems. And they walk in the door looking for those types of services. And both New York and Brooklyn, as well as the Queens Public Library, we have long waiting lists. So this grant will allow us to really cut into that waiting list and hiring new people to provide the services, and also, as Dame Louise talked about, to allow our youth to get better prepared for college as well. So this will allow us to expand our services tremendously.
And there has been a lot of research into what those English training classes can really accomplish. And of course, they make a huge difference for the person individually, but they make a big difference for all of us, right? More broadly for our economy, is that right?
Absolutely. This is a virtuous circle. The sooner people can speak the language, the sooner they'll get jobs. The sooner they get jobs, the sooner they will be able to engage in their children's education. The sooner they're able to do that, the sooner they will be paying taxes. They will be addressing the labor shortages. So this is a plus for everyone.
So let's follow up on that a bit, because I think, as we said at the top, we do sort of associate, I think, libraries with kids and reading, and we love kids and books here. But there is a lot more going on. And what's interesting is that there's a lot more in terms of career readiness, and there's a lot more in terms of college preparation, which is not necessarily the kind of thing that someone might understand is available at the library. So can each of you speak to what's going on in the libraries?
Well, Dennis can speak about the extraordinary initiatives they're undertaking, but I would say from an outsider, yes, we always think of libraries as books, but actually books were the means of conveying information. So libraries today are the means of providing access to information. That may be online, that may be information about careers, information about jobs, information about colleges, information about languages. So it's about providing access to anybody, no matter where they come from, to invaluable information. Carnegie had in mind what he saw libraries as what he called a ladder on which people could climb to advance themselves. And that's what they're doing. They're just doing it in a different way than when he gave $5.2 million in 1901 to create 65 libraries here in New York.
Yes. Dennis, can you tell us a little bit more specifically about some of the things that libraries offer these days that we might not think of?
So we started something 3 years ago called our Baby Library Card. And we linked up with hospitals and people who were giving birth and making sure that the families had library cards. And to date, we've given out 15,000 baby library cards.
Wow.
And we have special
Fabulous.
programs.
What a great
to
idea.
work with the parents and the newborns as far as what libraries mean to them. And again, it's not relegated to just one group. It's relegated to a group of people who are just there to learn, to listen, to participate. Tony and Linda, heads of New York and Brooklyn Public Libraries, they get tired of hearing me say this, but in the morning when I'm in the office, I'm down at the front door greeting our customers when they come in the door, saying good morning. And they go to a variety of spots. They go to the classes, so they go to ESOL programs. They go to the computer banks, so we have free computer services, and printout material. They go to our Job Business Academy for support around employment. They go to the stacks to get books and materials. Our Flushing Library, probably one of our highest traffic libraries in the country, we have papers from the local countries there. And you see people not just on the computers, but really looking at the native papers. I mean, libraries are the equal opportunity conveyor of information for people. I call it the community's living room because people come there to be supported. And then thanks to the support of the Carnegie Corporation, we'll be able to expand our support to teenagers as well. We've been able to grow our teen programs tremendously, but now this will allow us to grow it even more so in preparing our teenagers for college readiness and what it means. So it's again an engaging part of life for the public from birth to people who are seniors.
Yeah. Just as a last question for each of you, Andrew Carnegie described libraries as a cradle of democracy. What do those words mean to each of you today? Dame Louise?
Well, one of the things he talked about in libraries is something Dennis just alluded to, was he argued that the president and the pauper have exactly the same rights when they walk into a library. So this is an inherently democratic space where everybody who comes in has access to everything it contains. And I think today libraries are one of the few trusted institutions in society, in an ever-polarizing society. These are places with no political agenda, where everyone of any ideology, background, creed comes in, is treated the same way, has access to all the same information. So it's inherently a democratic institution.
Yes.
We don't care who the people are. You're welcome to come to a library. We treat you with respect. We have information. We don't ask you your background. We don't want to know anything about you, just that we're there providing the services and the support. The only thing we want you to do is always have a library card, but that is not necessary. You just walk in our door, you sit down. We're just there for the community and there to be supportive of the community.
Truly places where all are welcome.
Indeed.
Thank you so much to both of you for all this time. It was really great to chat.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, author and columnist Linda Stasi is back with Uncensored, and she has plenty to say about what she's reading.
Trust by Hernan Diaz is a Rashomon-structured telling of the 1929 Wall Street crash and one greedy, boring man who helped cause it. Trust is a novel, an autobiography, a memoir, and a private diary, or 4 conflicting accounts of the same story. In this case, the first book in a book is a fictionalized novel based on the life of another fictionalized character, financier Andrew Bevel, and his schizophrenic wife, Mildred. The second book within a book is Bevel's attempt to correct the novel by hiring a ghostwriter to script what he says is the true story. The third part, written from the perspective of the ghostwriter, is different again. The fourth part is Mildred's diary, which differs from all the other accounts. Got it? Good, because really, I didn't. And at 400 and something pages, 6 trillion glorious reviews, and 1 Pulitzer later, I still had a hell of a time getting through it. However, like most overly lauded books, this one, thank God, has punctuation. It is also one of Barack Obama's favorite books, but frankly, not one of mine. Maybe that's another reason I never became president. Taking place a world away and half a century later is another kind of historical novel, The Women by Kristen Hanna. This is a very good read about female military nurses during the Vietnam War, the forgotten, heroic women who dealt with the most horrific injuries in the most horrific of conditions. The book focuses on Frankie, the main protagonist, and the nurses who become her very best friends during and after the war. The war is told in scenes so graphic and so realistic that Hannah's research makes you feel like you're right there, like it or not. These heroic women, however, return to a country of anti-war protesters who deride, curse, and spit at them for going to war in the first place. If I have any issue with the book, it's that the whole girlfriends thing doesn't always ring true. I mean, no matter how good your best friends are, they just don't drop their entire lives, leave their families, travel across the country to come help get you out of one of your many funks, sometimes for months and months at a time. This is especially taxing, what with Frankie constantly in some terrible pickle or another. Wouldn't you at some point just tell her, hey, deal with it, man? War, casualties, great and bad love affairs, addiction, depression, all befall Frankie. Other than the forced you go girl aspect, it was nonetheless a terrific page-turning read. For Uncensored, I'm Linda Stacy.
That wraps up another chapter for us. Thanks so much for being here. A quick reminder to check us out on social media and download our new CUNY TV app, where we're available anytime, anywhere. I'm Carol Ann Riddell. See you next time on Book It.